Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto, Willies, your host. Today, I'm honored to have, once again, Jon Rosenthal. Jon Rosenthal is the state representative of Texas House District 135. He's a mechanical engineer. You guys know I love mechanical engineers because I'm one myself, as well as him being a good friend. Representative Jon Rosenthal, how are you doing this morning, my friend?
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you so much for having me on your show again.
Well, look, let me tell you, we go back a very long time from before you became a representative. I don't know if you remember when you were running,
I
but I
was going to
used,
say the first time I was on your show, I was a candidate
yeah,
for a state representative, and
and I told you straight out you were going to win the thing. You were kind of tenuous about winning, and I said, nah, you got this, brother. You get this. You know why? Because you are an honest guy, and because the people read that in your face in what you're coming out with. So anyhow, I want to jump before we get into a few other things. I want to jump into the thing that just happened, and that is we had two Republicans running for the House, the Speaker of the House. One that was an ultra right wing nationalist. Not, you don't have to repeat that. You don't have to acknowledge that. You're a representative. That's your colleague. And the other was a baseline conservative. I mean, and I think you all formed a coalition to elect him. Tell us a story.
so it's a good story, and thanks for bringing it up. It's not just a win for it's not just a win for Democrats. This is really a win for the state of Texas. So the way that the Texas House of Representative operates is unique, really, in the country and here. People imagine that we're more like Washington and that we don't talk with our across the aisle with our conservative colleagues, and nothing could be farther from the truth. It's actually quite collegial. The vast majority of legislation that we pass through the House, in my experience, has broad bipartisan support. And then, if we're engineers, so if you imagine the bell curve, it's the
Hmm.
thin little pieces at the ends that really end up as contentious issues. But it turns out that's like 13, 14% of the 4,000, 5,000 bills get that kind of treatment.
I want to
87%.
interrupt you there because I want to remind folks that, and that also is what gets the most attention by the news media. And if it bleed, it leads news media, and they don't show the amount of work that all of you do collegially when you're working. But continue,
That's
my
right.
friend.
That's right. Like establishing the new role for the
Hmm.
Texas Water Development Board in a statewide disaster mitigation and prevention effort. Texas broadband expansion across the state. I mean, we do a lot. We in my freshman term, we put $12 billion in public education, and that was almost a unanimous vote in the House. So there's big things that we do together. So I bring this up because it's not so the two candidates in question were David Cook and Dustin Burrows, and of course that's very inside baseball to even know. David Cook is a nice enough guy, but we saw him as aligned with the Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and he and the people that supported him envisioned a much different operating dynamic in the Texas House, where Republicans rule and Democrats take a back seat and don't really have a role in the process. So they had proposed notions of removing the Democrat committee chairs, which is kind of an unusual thing across the country, too, having some semblance of a power sharing agreement. He had proposed much more egregious things like not allowing any Democrat legislation to reach the House floor until all the Republican priorities had already been passed, which of course it destroys the entire ethic that we operate under. And the other one was they were going to have no Democrats on the calendars committee who decide, what
What gonna
bills,
take up? Yeah.
yeah, what bills come to the House floor. So once you get through your committee and it's referred to the House, it's calendars that decides what we'll actually take up as a full body. So the other thing they were going to do was replace our parliamentarians with presumably folks who are more partisan in nature, and remove some of the parliamentary tools that we use to fight against the things that we find objectionable. So while most legislation is popular and passes with broad consensus, there are some things, that this House, that this legislature passes that we find very objectionable. And you and I could probably talk about that all day. The partisan divide on the contentious issues, we know that the Republicans have a majority and they will pass some of their priorities. That's just life in the Texas legislature. But it's direly important for us to have the tools to both fight against it on the House floor, so try to defeat it with procedurally, with parliamentary tactics, and second, to lay down the record, to lay down the legislative intent and on the record, so that there will be grounds to use for the legal challenges for some of these things that pass that we think are boldly unconstitutional, unfair. And Texas legislature passes stuff like that every session. We are still in litigation over some of that from last session.
Now, I want to make a comment here because, I speak to a lot of people, and some folks have been sort of upset that Democrats went into the fold for picking the speaker, and some aren't. And I want to give kudos to both sides and tell both sides that we need them both. We need those that simply object and will simply not compromise because they keep everything in line. And we need legislators like you who actually realize that you're working for the people and you have to get the best option for even those people in your district that don't necessarily agree with some. If you have some of that in there, sometimes it can get a bit. I don't want to use the word elitist wrongly, but sometimes it can get to the point where, since you don't get your way, you're willing to you don't see what some of the other folks in your district's going through, and sometimes you just have to get what's best for them. So I want to commend you, and a commendation for you on working this way is not a slight on those who think differently in the
No, of
party.
course not.
It is just saying we need them both. Continue, my brother.
Yeah, Democrats in this, although some of us obviously have different perspectives and saw this race a little differently, our priority is to do the best that we can for our constituents. And a David Cook, having somebody who is just going to be a tool of the lieutenant governor, elected with only Republican votes and no Democrats, would have been disastrous, both for our constituents and for the state as a whole. So we need people playing all the roles, and we need, for sure, those among us holding all of us accountable for our principles and our values. And also, the pragmatic side of this was, if we want to get some of our stuff passed for our constituents, we want to be able to bring bills to the floor, and if we want to be able to fight against the most egregious of legislation, we're going to need those tools. And recognizing that Republicans have 88 seats and Democrats have 62, we had a Democrat candidate in the race, but they did not have, there was no possibility to elect a Democrat speaker. That's just not going to happen. So while I would love in some ways to have a scenario where all the Democrats stick together and just vote for our Democrat, like they do in Washington, once again, the dynamic in our chamber is much different than what happens in
Washington. Fact, you're still going to have chairpersons of some committees that are going to be Democrats, correct?
So hopefully so. That doesn't affect me personally. I actually am not emotionally tied to that, but it's an important dynamic in the Texas House. So we hope that will be the case. There will be a rules discussion next week. Okay. But what I'm getting at is, if all of us stuck together and just vote for the one Democrat, what you end up with at the end after multiple votes of this is you end up empowering the guy that will be most detrimental. And we just could not afford to have that happen. And
Exactly right. Now, I'm not sure how successful they're going to be to hold on to a chairman, at least one Democratic chairmanship. We hope that what's his name, Burrows, I believe.
Burrows,
Uh,
Dustin Burrows, yeah,
yeah,
from
Lesson
Lubbock.
Burrows sort of get enough Republicans to come along. We don't know if
So
that's
he
going to
already
be.
did the
Uh-huh.
ones that helped him ascend to the speakership. And he was elected with more Democrat votes than Republican
I
votes,
noticed that. I
which
noticed
is
that.
a huge win for Democrats. What it means is we got our choice.
You got your choice that you actually wanted. Now, I think it is also important this, and I want to hit you straight up on this and hit every Democratic candidate up on this. Right now, one of the big failures I see of the Texas legislature is the amount of money, first of all, that leaves on the table with the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act. Not only does it leave money on the table, but it actually is killing Texans. And Democrats are immediately ready to accept the Medicaid expansion to the Affordable Care Act. But I have one knock on just about every single representative, and it goes as follows. Every time something, we Democrats are lacking in rural votes mostly. Democrats are also lacking in the votes of some of the white working class. My contention is, or my thing is, why am I not seeing many of you whenever a hospital closed in Timbuktu, Texas, whenever you get an opportunity to actually go out, call a conference, not just a news conference, but have something and make sure there's media with if the mainstream media doesn't follow you, get the independent media to follow you and talk to those people in the rural areas and say, look, the policies I support are policies that are going to help you, farmer, are policies that are going to help you, nursing home in Timbuktu. That, why don't I see more of you going out to these areas and fishing for that marginal vote?
So it's a good question. It's a dramatic failure on the part of Democrats in general, really across this country,
The country, exactly.
but our state Democrats, our state party, and even to an extent, our House Democratic Caucus. So I don't know if folks are aware of this, since we're sort of Houston area based in this podcast. Maybe some people know who Representative Gene Wu is.
Yes, we do.
But Eugene Wu, Representative Wu, is now the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, which is a huge change. And we just elected him. He's a brand new chairman for our caucus. And his first move was to raise some money for the caucus so that we could have a couple of full-time employees working throughout not just the session but throughout the year. And the first person we hired was communications director.
Excellent.
So we're going to be working on more powerful, empowering communications. The very first thing that we did was coordinate press conferences across the state. We just did it on Sunday. So coming into the session, we laid out our priorities, and we will be actively working to message on everything that we see as Republican incompetence, intransigence, and just not caring for our constituents. So the very first part of that is taking
I,
care of
I
our people.
I love dogs. I mean, I don't worry about it. If
Okay.
your dog decides to
All right.
jump
Come
in your
here.
arm or something,
Come
it's
here, little
fine.
girl. Come here. So this is one of our rescues. This is Eddie, and Eddie
Hi,
is
Eddie.
he wants to be on TV, don't you, little boy, don't you?
And
And every time I'm on a Zoom, he's at my feet and he wants to be here, and that's who we just heard. So
well, he's a very cute dog, but he's a cute dog. Hey, well, and by the way, for those that are listening to this podcast, children jumping into arms, children holding on to the necks of the interviewees. are always welcome, because I like to make sure folks realize that we're all real out here. Anyway, I'm glad to hear about what Representative Gene Wu is doing. I would like give when you see him. In fact, I'm supposed to be interviewing him as well. But coming from other representatives, I think it's important that they don't do what many always do, and that is spend too much time trying to get some sort of a word in from the mainstream media. Yes, you try to get to the mainstream media, but remember that here in Texas specifically, the mainstream media isn't necessarily the friends of the policies that Democrats generally want. So I hope that within your agenda, you will strongly look at independent media in all the different forms that it exists to get your message out, and not give priority to a mainstream media that had not been a friend to the to Democrats and Democratic policies in this state.
That's a fair criticism, and actually, my friend, you should be on my list when we put out media advisories. I work with independent local media around me, community impact, and folks like that. But I'm gonna make sure you're on my list when we do.
Yeah, well, KPFT and other networks that Politics Done Right is on. That is one of the biggest commentaries as far as why don't we know this? Why haven't we done this, etc. So I think it's important. But anyway, before we kind of close out here, I want you to tell me a little bit about your plans for as representative for 135. What are your plans, and how does it affect Texas?
Well, it's a good question. So I've got, well, I'm certainly folded in with the big ticket efforts that Democrats are after, and of course, we want to expand Medicaid. We want to block the governor's push to privatize our public schools with vouchers. I want to remind everybody that that is not a done deal, and all of the mainstream media messaging that thinks it's some sort of foregone conclusion. I've been on the Ag and Livestock Committee now, and I have learned that in Texas, you don't want to count your chickens before they're hatched. So that we're going to be working our legislative behinds off to block the vouchers.
I think representatives can say, but I think you can. I don't think it's unethical for a religious leader to say work or butts off.
So I'm an oil field engineer, and I swear a lot.
So you're careful.
I try to be careful. But yeah, so we're all in for public education and access to healthcare. Those are the two biggest ticket items, but also to raise the minimum wage. We've got some priorities for our working families and stuff. The part for me personally, I've got a couple of bills that are near and dear to my heart. I've got one to address community violence. So to work on community violence intervention, where you intervene in the violent cycle before anybody picks up a gun or beats their wife or whatever. You want to have systems in place to address that. And then also, I want to end child marriage in Texas. So I have a bill to do that, to raise the age to marry without exception to 18 years old. And it's unbelievable that it's not there. And the last thing is, being suburban, I have tons of municipal utility districts, all the people out there that deal with MUD districts and homeowners associations. I am working on legislation to rein in them at least a little bit. So those are my kind of personal priorities for the session.
Well, it seems to me like all of those have Texas-wide implications. So I'm pretty sure you're likely to get quite a few of those bills through. Well, anyway, Representative,
keep our fingers crossed.
I've got faith in you. What should I have asked you that I didn't ask you?
You didn't ask my prognosis overall for the session. And I think we can expect that the Republicans in the majority will pass some stuff that we don't like. But your Democrats in the Texas House are going to fight for you. And so it is our job not just to pass things that we believe in, but to really combat the things that we think are egregious. And I believe having elected the speaker gives us the tools to help block some of the worst of the worst. So I hope folks will come away from this podcast understanding a little bit more about our role. When you're in the minority party, you're not going to get everything you want, but we intend to use the tools that we have to block the worst of the worst.
State Representative Jon Rosenthal represents House District 135. He's a mechanical engineer, of course, and as well a friend. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you so much.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.